Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the Saints Insider Podcast for Tuesday, June the 4th. I'm Zach Ewing with Rod Walker, Luke Johnson, Matthew Paris, coming to you on a slightly different day than usual. Schedule kind of gets messed up in these summer months, but we are going to take you through kind of an off-season reset today. Things that we've liked about the offseason, things that we don't like about the offseason. We're calling it reasons to be encouraged or discouraged if you're a Saints fan about what's taken place this offseason. I think kind of in starting, guys, we all went into this offseason pretty damn pessimistic about where this franchise was. So that's the starting point here.
Yeah, I mean, when was it on the podcast, like 5 or 6 months ago, where we were all asked to predict whether the Saints were going to be better or worse in 2024, and I think all of us went worse.
It was like a New Year's thing. Yeah, it was like first week of the year.
So, but this is the time of year where hope springs eternal.
17-0.
Yeah, I've joked before that OTA stands for optimistic training activities because everyone seems to think everything's going to work. What was that?
You said you nailed it. Optimistic.
You got the optimistic pause that
training activities.
I always have trouble with team activities. It's team activities.
Yes.
God dang it. I always mess that up. But yeah, the optimistic part is what I'm going for. Like, people always seem to think everything is sunshine and rainbows at this time of year.
It is. Saints are going to crush it, win the Super Bowl.
Second team ever to win it in their home. No, third team ever to win it in their home stadium.
A few weeks ago, we did a pod where we gave Rod grief for picking them 9-8, and then Luke and I ended up with the same record. So that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I had to pick a couple of losses that I didn't actually see just to get to the 7-10 that I really have been at all offseason. So anyway, from that baseline, let's talk about some of the reasons that we could be.
Wait. Before we start, just make sure you don't go too fast. I know you're fond of going too fast lately.
Oh, God. Yes. Dry Prong, Louisiana speeding ticket over the weekend. I had to drive to Ruston. 62 and a 45. It's like the wimpiest speeding ticket of all time until Matt Paris beat me yesterday.
I got my first. I'm officially a New Orleans resident because I got my first speeding ticket. It's first speeding camera ticket. So 29 and a 20. On the way to rookie minicamp.
We are the Saints Insider Podcast, brought to you by Ricky Bobby.
and I mean, sometimes you get pulled over and you think if you're nice and polite and cooperative, they'll let you off with a warning. There was just none of, like, this cop didn't even want to have a conversation.
You didn't like the way you look, man.
It was just, okay, give me your license, come back, here's your citation. Anyway.
And you didn't tell him that you were like a Saints insider.
Yeah.
I did not go.
Did you know who I am?
Do you know who I am? Line.
And
I know Chris Olave.
And then my son talked about for the next 100 miles how he was bad luck because his mom a couple years ago got a red light ticket when he was in the car, and now I got this when he was in the car, and I had to tell him it's not your fault.
Well, it sounds like it might be his fault.
It could be. Hopefully he won't listen to this. Then we'll start over. All right. Hey, subscribe to the channel. Like the video. 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We appreciate all of you. We are going to get those giveaways out in the mail. We've had a little bit of delay with the books, but we've got them. We've got our winners. And,
Did the guy respond to you?
He kind of did. Rosenfield 10, if you're listening, I got a comment that said, I'm trying to respond, but I don't know how or something, but clearly you do. Just email me, man. Just email me. zewing@theadvocate.com. I need your address so we can send you the goodies. Anyway, reasons for optimism and pessimism beyond speeding tickets by staff. We're in a good mood, so we're going to start with the optimistic guys. And I think the first thing is that this offense looks like it could be demonstrably different. Like not just window dressing, but actually something that could make a difference because it's basically the same set of players minus Michael Thomas. So why would the offense be any better? Well, Klint Kubiak's scheme is a pretty good reason.
Yeah, I think we've all been really encouraged by what we've seen so far. And look, we've seen just like surface level stuff. But I think the stuff that we have been shown just makes you feel good about the direction of it. I think the quarterbacks have all looked really sharp in this. I think that the team as a whole just kind of looks like it gets the concepts so far. And, massive block of salt for this, but like even the running game, I mean, you can see just when they're doing non-padded stuff, You can see the lanes there this year that, I mean, frankly, just weren't there even in the OTAs in past years. So I just think that there's a chance that this offense takes a big step forward, even if they are losing a couple starters on the offensive line, even with it being the first year of a new scheme. I just think that there's some excitement there for it, because you can see how it can be better already.
Right, and I would say it's different, but it also suits Derek Carr's strengths a lot. I mean, you mentioned that he was sharp, but I think we kind of sleep on that. He's not new anymore. He's the clear-cut starter, so you can kind of overlook him at certain points. But he's been spot-on accurate with the football. A lot of the routes they run, I think, play to his strengths, even ignoring the play-action stuff, which we've hammered home a million times. It's just kind of short in the middle of the field stuff. He's right on time. The quarterbacks have really talked about how the footwork in this offense are tied to the timing of the receivers' routes. It just really seems to suit their strengths, which I think you kind of look back at before that 5-game stretch to close the season last year. It was what was wrong with the Saints offense. It wasn't really tailoring the scheme to the player's strengths. And I feel like this one, that's like the clear difference to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was probably a little stale. That's the word I would use for how the offense was. But I also think, though, that whoever the Saints had brought in as coordinator, I think that would probably be our talking point, because this offense just needed like a reset almost. So they could have brought in me or you, and I think people would be excited about that.
Depends on how it looks.
4 verts, Y stick.
Exactly. Just running 4 verts the whole game.
I do think change was good.
Yeah,
change was needed, and change is usually good in the situations. The big thing is the offense last year statistically wasn't bad, but it was so inconsistent.
That's the thing. The numbers do not tell the full story for the offense, for Derek Carr, for a lot of things. The swings between the highs and lows were so drastic, and even within games. They'd go 3 quarters where they look completely inept, and then they'd put up 21 in the fourth. But by that point, like, they needed 30 in the fourth.
And you say, they lost 28-24. Offense wasn't the problem. It really was.
It was, yeah, and it was for much of the season, and not only was it stale, it was predictable, right? I think it seemed like there were just solutions readily available that they were not going to, whether it was using Taysom Hill in the red zone, whether it was adding the play action, which like a lot of us were just like pounding the table for, and then by the end of the year they add play action and they take off. I just think that it had gotten to the point where they were just like, we are going to do what we do, and it wasn't working anymore. So just bringing in something completely new, something that is proven to be successful in the NFL, I think is good. And I think it's energized the players. I think the new coaches have energized the players. I'm really, really cautiously, I know we're going to talk about offensive line later, but I'm cautiously optimistic about what John Benton and Rick Dennison are going to bring to this offensive line, and what the style of play can do for this offensive line. I think the Saints offense will cause some problems for people this year. Is it going to be good enough for them to win a bunch of games? Who knows? Are they going to be good right away? Probably not. But I do think that by the end of the year, we're going to be talking about the Saints offense as a legitimate, fun NFL offense, which is something we haven't said around here since, 2020? So, I think there's just reason for this to be a really positive thing going into the season.
You can tell the players really believe in it, too.
Yeah.
I mean, just everybody talked in the locker room, and they talk about how they've watched this offense over the years in other places. So, I mean, they believe it can work, and, getting the players to buy in after the struggles is a good thing for this team.
One of the questions I do have is, and we won't know the answer to this until the games start, is just how's the sequence of things? Jeff's not on this pod, but if he was, I can hear him going back. There was nothing wrong with the old scheme.
Yeah,
because the Saints for years ran it, and they were some of the best offenses of all time. It was the order of the play calling, what they were adapting to. I think that was kind of the major problem for the Saints after Sean Payton left, is they didn't necessarily have those answers in the game flow anymore. So I do think that is something that Klint Kubiak and company are going to have to solve, is just, can you get to your 3rd and 7 option easy? Or are they taking away the run game, and then if so, what happens? It's just how do you adapt in game, and we aren't going to know that until the game starts.
Well, that's something that is Klint Kubiak is unproven as of yet.
Right.
He has been a play caller, but has he been a successful play caller yet? No. This scheme has been successful, but like a lot of times it is also the guy pulling the strings. Mm-hmm. Sean Payton's offense was really successful. You put a new guy in the play caller seat, and it wasn't nearly as successful. So we've got to see that out of Klint before we can say this is going to be a huge success.
And what you're talking about, Matt, is that predictability. Yeah. No, was there anything wrong with that offensive scheme? It has worked. But number one, the league adapts. The league knows what you're going to get. And Pete Carmichael proved that he wasn't a great play caller in that sequencing. So, we don't know that about Kubiak. But the other thing, and we'll kind of use this as our first reason to be discouraged, our first reason for pessimism. An offense is only only as good as its offensive line, and we just don't know. I don't think it's a panic move, but it's certainly not customary to say, okay, Trevor Penning, you're going to move from left tackle to right tackle, and Tali Fuanga is going to move from right tackle to left tackle, and we're going to figure out left guard and just hope it all works. And I also put on this slide, which we can talk about too, is the defensive line was not very good last year, and they really have not done anything to address that outside of Chase Young, who's been injured. So we don't know what they've done on either line. But let's start with the offensive line. This is one where there might be a little bit of reason for both optimism and pessimism.
I think so. Yeah. Go ahead, Rod.
I'll be the pessimistic guy on this. You mentioned that it's three positions that they're lacking in. Basically, you drafted a guy 2 years ago who played left tackle, and now you're moving to the other side. Then you draft a guy in this last draft, and you're moving him to the opposite side. Which is just kind of weird to even see a team have to do that, but that's what they are. And I just think those tackle positions are just so important. And if you can't protect Derek Carr, it doesn't matter what Klint Kubiak is doing. It's going to be issues. And if we see the offensive line that we saw at the beginning of last season, this team is going to struggle. And if we see the one we saw at the end of last season, then maybe they will be fine. I do think that the fact that they did make these changes and giving Trevor a fresh start on the other side, I think it could be a positive. So we just have to see how it works out. And we don't know how good Fuanga is going to be. I know I butchered his name, but
no, it's okay. It's okay.
I'm gonna say the line. If you're just looking at it from an off-season standpoint, I think the line is discouraging, only because the only real addition they made, the starting caliber player, was Fuanga. They lost potentially three. We're going into this assuming Ryan Ramczyk is not going to play.
Right.
So they lost potentially 3 starters out of 5 on the offensive line, and they filled it with one who's a rookie who you've never seen play before in the NFL level, and he's probably going to go through his struggles. So that's the main thing for me, is their main addition on the offensive line outside of Tali Fuanga was Oli Udoh, who hasn't really been a starting player for 2 years. They brought in some other guys with some starting experience, but nobody who you really are going to say, like, yes, that guy's going to fill in and be a high-level starter. So this whole experiment they're making with the offensive line is really just like a big leap of faith, that some guys are going to step up, improve, get better. And part of you likes that. Part of you is just like, yes, if that works, it's going to be great. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but it has a lot of potential to not work. And as much as we like what this offense is all about, the offensive line is the foundation. It's what you build everything upon. It's what you build the run game on. It's how you protect the quarterback. It's as Harbaugh famously said at the owners' meetings, like, it's the one position is not completely dependent on every other position to be successful. If that unit is playing at a high level, the odds are the rest of the offense is going to play at a high level. So, it's a big question mark. It's discouraging to see that they didn't do a ton to add to it, considering what they lost and considering how they played last year. But I think it can potentially work out if a lot of things go their way. But again, it's just like the little bit of a dice roll for me. And I don't know, this is an important season, and that's an important position. I don't know if that's the one you really want to roll the dice on.
It's easy to say, well, it can't be any worse than it was last year, so change is good.
It certainly can be worse.
By the end of the year, they had actually stabilized that line. It wasn't great, but it wasn't bad, and the offense, again, showed improvement because of that. So it certainly can get worse, Matt. And it, to me, feels like maybe they just needed to add one more significant piece, and they didn't do it.
Well, I mean, maybe we're counting too much on Ali Udo, but I actually think he could be a factor depending on. It's really interesting with how they've handled Trevor Penning this offseason. And the more I wrote about him this week, and the more I looked at it, kind of think it was really about trying to build back up his confidence. And as for as many technical problems as there were there, why coaches and even Penning himself have emphasized fresh start is to get this guy back to a spot to where they feel like they believe in him. They want him to, like, moving him to right tackle wasn't necessarily just because you're so bad at left tackle you have to play right. I think that was part of it. But it was also, hey, new position, new opportunity, go seize it. But it is June. Ali Udo hasn't practiced yet. Are they that confident in Penning once Udo returns, or he has experience playing right tackle? Do they keep Penning with the starters, or do they move Udo into the starters and focus on Penning's development behind the scenes and allow it there? Like, I still think right tackle in particular is really unsettled, and we won't really have a better idea of how that unfolds until training camp. And, you know, that because there's that uncertainty right now, I can't feel necessarily confident in the offensive line. Left tackle, I actually feel okay about. I think Wanga is going to be okay there. I think he has the athleticism to play the position. I think he's really bright. They all seem really high on him. It's just Penning I have more of a question of.
And we could do a whole pod on Penning, and maybe we will.
I mean, we basically have.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about him in a minute. But I did want to talk about the defensive line also, Rod. And, I mean, this is – Chase Young hasn't played yet. They knew he wasn't going to play yet. He won't play till training camp with this neck injury. He could make a difference, but you talk about rolling the dice. You need Cam Jordan to play better. Tano Pasnion is now out. That defensive line was a weak spot on this team last year for the first time in a long time. And it's hard to see, unless Chase Young suddenly is healthy and productive again, how it gets a whole lot better.
Yeah, I was about to say, I don't see – they haven't made any moves, I don't think, on that side of the ball that makes them better unless Chase comes around. If they can't put pressure on the quarterback and struggle stopping, big runs and stuff, I mean, they're gonna have some issues again. So, both lines are big concerns for me. Offensive line more, but defensive line is not far behind them at all. We haven't seen Nathan Shepard at all, going to the interior now, but he's been out. So I guess, you can go with Bryan Bresee and Colin Saunders inside. But, on the edge, I think they have some concerns, especially with Tano. He's not going to be at the beginning of the season. Carl Granderson, he had a pretty good year last year. You want to see Cam, get back to the old Cam. I know he dealt with a lot of injuries last year. But, outside of that, I think they could struggle up front on both sides of the ball.
And then coach like Dennis Allen will tell you that's no way to win football games, is to be weak up front on both sides.
Yeah, it's, again, foundational. Like, it's what their whole defense is built on, is dominant defensive line play, and they had it for a long time. When Dennis was defensive coordinator and early on his tenure as head coach. So the thing I'm really wondering about is, like, what version of Cam are we going to see? The guy's got the Iron Man streak is over for him, but he's still, like, he plays through a lot every year. Just don't know how much of last year was the injuries that he was dealing with, which were significant injuries, or were a sign of a player in decline. I think it's a fair question to ask if Cam is like in the sharp downslope of his career just because of the way last year went. I mean, he was not the player that we've seen for more than a decade here. So if he can get back to being even the player that he was a couple of years ago, where it was spurts where he'd get like 4 or 5 sacks in 3 games and be really disruptive and really win you a game defensively, if he can be that, great. But if he's going to be out there playing 70% of the snaps and getting you 2 sacks, like, it's it's a recipe for a disaster. But the other guys on the defensive line, they've got Peyton Turner and Isaiah Foskey, like, huge question marks. Foskey contributed basically nothing as a rookie. Matt wrote about him. Have you written about him? Matt is writing about him.
That was one thing the last open practice for OTAs is tomorrow, and that was a guy we're kind of hoping to get a better look at.
Yeah, Foskey's obviously high pedigree, second round draft pick. It was really, really productive player at Notre Dame, but like gave you next to nothing as a rookie. They want to see him cut it loose and use he's got the physical gifts, use them, and don't worry about making mistakes. Can he be that? TBD. Can Peyton Turner actually stay healthy? We've seen the flashes out of Peyton Turner being a really good player. Can he ever live up to being a first-round draft pick? It remains to be seen if he can stay on the field. So that's been a huge issue for him for his entire career. So, like, it's another one of those things where it's like a lot of dice rolls, a lot of like maybe Cam's not in sharp decline. Maybe Chase Young is healthy and gives us 8 to 10 sacks this year. And maybe Carl Granderson can continue adding and be a little bit more consistent instead of being the kind of flash and not much else player. Maybe Peyton Turner can stay healthy. Maybe Bryan Bresee takes a step forward. Maybe. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's good, but maybe it's really bad again. And then if they can't stop the run and if they're not getting after the quarterback, that puts so much stress on the really, really good parts of this defense.
Yeah. I think I'll go the other side and be the more optimistic just for the sake of argument.
So convincing.
Yay. If you look at Cam Jordan's numbers prior to him getting injured, the underlying pressures were sound really nerdy there, but his numbers were like actually okay. He wasn't getting the sacks, but he was still pressuring the quarterback. He was still affecting the pocket. I don't think he'll ever be the guy where he'll get 2 to 3 sacks in a game and just completely wreck a game anymore. I just don't think, that's necessarily possible at 34 years old, but I think they can get enough out of him where, all right, he's a solid pass rusher. You have some answer there. It's the rest of the guys that, Granderson got paid. He deserved that contract. It'd be great if you could get something from him again, but I'm interested to see how they incorporate Chase Young into the fold. What's his playing time going to be like? Is he going to be... This is a really pivotal year for Chase Young, like the football player. He's on a 1-year deal. It's a prove-it deal no matter how much he tried to smack that narrative down in the spring after he signed. He frustrated coaches in Washington with how he played and what he didn't do.
I was waiting for that.
But, it's really... Can he? How does this coaching staff want him to rush, and does he listen to their instructions? I mean, that was kind of the underlying tension in Washington, is that he wasn't always following the script. There was a lot of talk of him freelancing plays, and maybe some of that was blown out of proportion. But because when he's on the top of his game, he is an excellent pass rusher. It's just, can he get back to that, and can he stay healthy?
Yeah.
I do think there's a chance Bryan Bresee turns into an excellent player this year. He showed a lot in his rookie season. A player, an interior pass rusher as a rookie, finishing with 5 sacks or whatever. That's really good. I think he can be a very, very good player for them. I mean, he needs to improve as a run defender to really truly see the field more. But I think there's a lot of potential there for him to be really, really good as long as he stays healthy.
And that's excellent segue, because our next reason to be optimistic is sort of the growth of young players. And this one's kind of tricky because in OTAs, again, how do you see exactly, especially with linemen, how good they're going to be? But I think we all agree Fuanga has a chance to be really good. Bresee could take a step. Isaiah Foskey is going to get his opportunity. Some of the skill position guys, I think Kendra Miller is going to get an opportunity. A.T. Perry may get an opportunity. This roster needed to get younger badly, and we're starting to see that next wave of guys who may be stepping into those roles.
Yeah, I mean, let's just think about it. Potential starters on rookie contracts like Chris Olave, A.T. Perry, we could count as a potential starter if he's a third receiver. Kendra Miller is going to have a bigger role this year, maybe 3 on the offensive line, and Fuanga Nick Saldiveri, and Trevor Penning. Bryan Bresee, you still got Alontae Taylor and Paulson Adebo on rookie contracts. Jordan Howden could potentially step into a bigger role at safety. Pete Werner's still on his rookie contract. Like
Foskey.
Yeah. Foskey. I mean, some of these guys, Werner and Adebo, are going to need new contracts in the offseason. Remains to be seen whether they're going to get those in New Orleans. But I think it's encouraging that you've got some youth. They're still going to be an old roster. They still have 34-year-old Cam Jordan, 35-year-old Demario Davis, 33-year-old Tyrann Mathieu as key players in their defense. Derek Carr's in his mid-30s. Alvin Kamara's pushing 30. Yeah, they're still. Taysom is going to play a huge role. He's 34, I think. You're still going to have older players, but that's okay as long as they're still playing at a high level. But it's when you start getting to like depth pieces being in their 30s, at the expense of giving young guys opportunities. I think that's where you start getting into trouble. So it is an encouraging sign to me that they are getting a little bit younger here, counting on some younger guys who are not going to be earning a ton of money relative to the NFL pay scale to play big roles for you.
Yeah. And these younger guys are, you talk about Olave and Adebo. I mean, these are guys who look like they can be really good NFL players. I mean, like they're going to be star players, you would think. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a good young foundation that this team has, which you need.
Yeah, and you talk about older players like Cam Jordan. I mean, if you listen to him, he's basically was playing through injury last year, which is one reason why you maybe could expect a little bit of a bounce back. But on the other hand, older players are more likely to get hurt. You need to have these younger guys there on your depth chart, on your two deep, who can step in. And it seems like the Saints are in a lot better spot there than they were certainly a year ago, even 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, just look at cornerback. I mean, we haven't even mentioned Kool-Aid McKinstry, who they drafted in the second round. If one of those guys gets hurt, he can potentially step in. I think it's wise that they're using their younger players as kind of like, look at Nick Saldiveri, rather than they did sign some guards, Shane Lemieux, Lucas Patrick. If Saldiveri doesn't, pan out, maybe they put a veteran there. But for now, you take a fourth rounder from a year ago, you move him inside to guard, you see how he does, you really allow him to try and grow and develop at that spot. I think it's a smart strategy.
Well, we just did the pod a couple of weeks ago, drafting players on the Saints team, and the conclusion we reached was they don't have a lot of young talent. So I think a lot of the reason we feel that way is because the young talent that they do have, we haven't seen. I think you got to give these guys opportunities to show what they can do. So, yeah. I mean, that could turn into a big positive for this team, especially just considering where they are from a cap perspective. Is just find these guys who are affordable and controllable. Yeah. See what they can do, and if they develop and turn into players for you, that's great. That is really good for your long-term outlook here.
And I don't think it's contradictory of us to say this team doesn't have a lot of young pieces it can count on, but yet it's worth taking the chance. Yeah. I think if you're looking for reasons to be optimistic as a Saints fan, it's okay to try and put faith in those young players. There's also just not a lot of them in general to be like, wow, this team is really set up for the future. But for now, I don't think they're in a really bad spot trying to count on a guy like Nick Saldiveri, Rashid Shaheed, just guys down the list that I think with a little bit more opportunity, they would benefit from it.
And side note, I do think it's important they get Shaheed locked up to a as reasonable an extension as they can before he gets a real opportunity to truly blossom this year and then price themselves out of it.
Another player that, and I don't know if he fits into this category with young players, and I promise I'm not talking about it because of what school he went to, but I think Willie Gay has been a guy that when they signed him, I think we all were like, he'll be a good special teams guy, might not be able to help, but just kind of talking to DeMario and Pete Werner, I mean, they feel like this is a guy that's probably a little better than maybe that we were saying as far as his athleticism and stuff. So, I mean, linebacker is a position that, to me, they hadn't really had a lot of depth there. It was kind of DeMario and whoever else. And so I think he's one of those players that can come in and help this team tremendously on the defense.
I see you wearing your Mississippi State.
Yeah,
I was going to say he's
there.
got the maroon on. Yeah.
And get
Award,
you,
just
we need we got Matt's bell here. We need to
We
get
need
a
real
cowbell.
bell, a real bell for me.
No, we're gonna get a cowbell in here because every time Willie Gay makes a play, and following Tuesday we're on the pod, we just start
Clang-a,
clanging.
baby.
Or JT Gray.
Or
Or Jonathan Abram.
Hey, got a couple state guys.
Need some Mizzou guys on this roster, man.
Montez Sweat went to Mississippi State. Unrelated.
All right. There it is.
Just out there.
That's worlds colliding.
Yep.
Okay. You guys wanted to talk about Trevor Penning. He's kind of the poster boy for this, and we did mention him earlier. But he's the poster boy for continue to give these young guys we know have talent, give them some opportunities, and sooner or later it will click. And Matt, you talked to, for the story that's coming out in the next day or two, the coaches that he worked with in the offseason. I mean, they really have pushed a lot of chips in with Trevor Penning to say, go show us that this can work.
They have, and that's John Benton, the new offensive line coach, said he was aware of the history and how Penning's development was kind of stunted by injuries, that maybe he was thrown into the fire too quickly. They don't necessarily care about that right now. Maybe they do. One of the other quotes I can't get out of my head when it relates to Penning is that Brian Baldinger quote when we talked to him after the draft of how when it's 3rd and 13, there's no play action. You just got to trust the guy whether he can hold up, and how he hasn't really held up so far at this career. I mean, it's going to be a key tell in Penning's development is, what does he actually learn from a technique standpoint? Can he hold his ground better? Those are the things that, you really need to start seeing him making strides. And we've seen in practices so far where, Michael Hodges gone on Penning for being a little too physical in this portion of spring. I think that was kind of a problem generally with Penning, is that he was too over-aggressive and lapsed on his technique. And then, he committed a false start in last week's practice as well. I looked this up the other day. Tied on offense, Penning had the most penalties for the Saints last year with 5. And he was tied with Andres Pete, but Penning played 13 snaps in the last 11 games.
Yeah.
Still had tied for the most penalties.
Yeah.
But it's the thing with him is there's so much you can just be like bad, and then you look at him and you're like, he doesn't look like anybody else, and he is a freak athlete. You can see the potential for it there.
Right.
Like the bads have been really bad, and you still can see how the good can be good. And I think that's why this offseason was so crucial for him. He obviously didn't have an offseason leading up to the draft. He was training for the draft. It is what it is. Every player goes through that. Then he gets hurt his entire rookie season. He only plays really the last 5 games. He only had 1 start. And then he gets the Liz Frank injury in the very last game of his rookie season. So then he doesn't have an offseason leading into his second season. And he doesn't come back until training camp. And that's the first time we see him. He doesn't have a chance to refine his technique and work on being a better player. It's all about rehab. This is the first time he's had that. So let's see if he can take all those bad aspects of his game. And they're not just going to go away. Right? It's not like he's taking a magic pill. He's going to be an all-pro right tackle. But
He gets suspended for that.
yeah. But can you use this time wisely to work on all the stuff that was holding you back, and can you take all this giant pile of talent that you have and mold it into something that looks like a respectable NFL starter? I think there's really a chance that it's there, because the skill set is uncommon. There are just not many guys who look like him, who can move like him. It's just, can he put it together? I think they're banking on that possibility, but they do have the fallback option there if it's not there.
Well, the move part of this is, I think, really important, is because as much as they've talked him up and they've worked on his technique, I think that the scheme change itself is really important for what they're banking on. To focus on the positive with him, he does have that athleticism that I think is going to fit well in this system. He can get out in space. He can move. He can really overpower guys in the run game. I do think that's going to be really important for them and in general. If they want this run game to be what it is, he's going to have to push and move guys. And to his credit, I think that is a strength of his game.
If he makes the leap, I think it'll be, at least since I've been covering the team, I don't know if I've seen a player who would have gone from, what the expectations were to where he fell off to last year, where he was buried on the depth chart, to all of a sudden becoming this productive player, not even an all-pro player. But I think it'll be a tremendous leap if he can do it.
Yeah, kind of unprecedented.
Yeah,
so that goes to show. Yeah, it's probably unlikely that it happens, but if it does, man, what a boon for the Saints that would be.
Yeah, it'd be huge. It'd be huge. They still have him under control this season, next season, and the year after that on a 5th-year option if they wanted to exercise that. So if he can show he can be a capable NFL starter this year, then yeah, they exercise the option. They have him under control for another 3 years. They have Talifuanga under control for another 5 years. They've got Nick Saldiveri under control for another 3 years. That's 3 best of your starting offensive line that you have cheap if they're good players. I mean, it is so important for them to hit on this, which is why we've seen them put so much attention into getting it right with him. Because it's crucial. Like you just can't whiff on the first round picks. They need him to at least be reliable.
And left tackle to right tackle it's a significant change. It's not as big as kicking inside to guard, but to like who's ever done this before, hit the bell. Sorry. I'm trying. I think it's relevant. So in Washington, they signed Eric Flowers, who all-time bust with the Giants and the Jags. And they actually moved him to guard in this case, and he was much better there. But part of that was because Bill Callahan, their offensive line coach at the time, really identified saying, like, all right, this is going to suit you better. We really believe in this. And he played much better. And I'm not going to say that Penning is going to have that level of success or be that, but I do see similar parallels of, all right, all you need is a chance. We're really going to believe in you. And right now they're proving that. But tying it back to earlier, I just want to see how far that belief extends once Oli Udoh is healthy, because that could easily change.
And the first time that he, commits a crucial holding call or gives up a sack or something, in week 1. So you're watching the Saints Insider Podcast. We were talking today about reasons for optimism and pessimism from this offseason. One more reason for discouragement. Rod, I think you brought this up first in our group chat, and that's the schedule. This one thing we've gotten this offseason is the schedule. And everybody kind of said going into it, hey, the Saints really need a soft landing to get some momentum going, get the new offense uncorked. They didn't get that. They do open at home with the Panthers, which is about as soft as you could get. But you've got Dallas, Philly, Kansas City all in those first 5 weeks. You've got the trip from Sean Payton and Denver coming up pretty soon. You've got 5 of your 6 division games in the first 10 weeks. This team's got to hit the ground running. And with all of these question marks we're talking about, I don't know that's what you wanted.
Yeah, I just think it didn't do them any favors. They come out anything better than 1-4 in the first 5 games. I think they've kind of done well. And to Dennis Allen's credit, I mean, I think the team has sort of gotten better as the season went along, it seems like. I don't know if it's because the schedule lightens up or what, but I do think there's some potential for them, even if they do struggle, to get better. But, I mean, you just kind of want to see them start fast, because you just don't know how things could go down the drain. People might just kind of get discouraged. And, I mean, we always talk about the fan base. We know how they're going to be if this thing doesn't get off to a good start with a new coordinator.
Yeah, well, and just being honest here, like, I don't want to keep being the guy who's always harping on Dennis Allen's job security, but like, just being real. I mean, he's had to ask, or the Saints brass and Dennis Allen, Mickey Loomis, they've all had to answer questions about Dennis Allen being the head coach each of his 2 years as head coach after the conclusion of the season. I would call the dissatisfaction level in the fan base high. And, I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on the Saints to win this year. And there's a lot of pressure on Dennis Allen and this brain trust that they've assembled to win this year. And, frankly, if they just get off to a slow start against a pretty tough schedule here, I mean, you can see
the noise will get
an avenue for them to feel like they're forced into making a decision. So, it's absolutely crucial for them. And, them's the breaks, man. The schedule just is what it is. You have to play whatever team is in front of you. But But you can see a way this could get ugly early, and that could just kind of derail the whole season and really potentially change the direction of the franchise. So it's imperative on him to get off to a fast start against a really good group of teams, because like the heat's going to be on him otherwise.
And we've mentioned the Denver game as kind of that key point of Sean Payton comes to town. They're 2-4. The heat's on. Like I think another thing too to keep in mind is Drew Brees' Hall of Fame, Saints Hall of Fame induction isn't scheduled yet, and if that's early in the season, and Brees comes back and people are excited for him, but just angry at the team, that's not going to be a good contrast as well for them either. So, I mean, the early part of the schedule is pretty tough. I mean, there's really no beating around that unless some of these teams, unless they get lucky with, say, Patrick Mahomes misses a week because of a sprained ankle and they have to face Carson Wentz. Like, it's not. No, I thought you were gonna hit the bell.
No.
Okay, all right.
No, that's too much.
Too much of a risk.
Reference.
Okay, but I just think they would need a little bit of a break. But it's football and it happens sometimes.
You talked about this being OTA and you're always for optimism, but I think among the fan base right now, I don't think at least on social media, I don't think the fan base is really optimistic right now. I think they're probably more on the discouraging side, right?
Well, and ultimately, right, and I put this on the slide, the trends are you're asking Dennis Allen to do something as a head coach he's never done before. He's never led a team to the playoffs. They came reasonably close last year, but they didn't do it. You're asking a quarterback in Derek Carr to do something he's only ever played in one playoff game. He's led two teams to the playoffs. He was injured one year. They've never won one. You just need a lot to break right here.
It's okay. Luke brought his note cards to defend Dennis Allen, so you got Chuck
Noll.
Yeah. Difference is these guys actually won a playoff game their first 6 years as a head coach. I mean, not saying it can't work.
Yeah, I don't want to harp too much on like Dennis Allen's Raiders tenure just because it was an impossible situation. Not only are the Raiders, but they tried doing the whole thing where they signed the 35 and over all-stars, and he's like working with like Terrell Pryor as his quarterback.
Oh, that 13 roster is just abysmal.
It was really, really bad. They were in a bad salary cap spot and they were trying to get out of it. So I don't like using that to talk about his head coaching acumen, but I think it's fair to look at what he's done in 2 years as Saints head coach, because he inherited a roster that was, that was pretty solid, on the downturn, but still pretty solid. Still probably a playoff caliber roster. His team endured a lot of injuries. His first season, he only had 7 games out of his starting quarterback, and a lot of issues that are not on Dennis Allen. But at the same time, like it's now or never. It feels like. Because, I think a lot of people are feeling this team's trending in the wrong direction. So there's only really one way to turn that around, and that's to take the narrative into your own hands and win a bunch of games that people don't expect you to win, and to be the guy that they all think you are. But if he proves he's not in year 3, I mean, it's going to be really hard to justify keeping him around. And it's, I personally like Dennis Allen. I think he's a really nice guy. I think he's a good football coach. I think if he was a defensive coordinator anywhere in the league right now, anybody would be very happy to have him. But he's still got to prove it as a head coach.
Yeah, and Rod, to your point, the flip side of the schedule, notice all of these things we're talking about have kind of the other side of them. If they could get off let's say somehow a 3-2 start against that schedule, it's not likely, but if they could do it, man, they would be set up really well, because the back half of the schedule is so soft. You'd be in a good position. You'd have some momentum. Like, it could go the other way, but it's just that pressure point is going to be so significant.
Yeah. I mean, if they start off 3-2, we can start getting those amen headlines ready.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Super Bowl in the Dome, man. 3-2.
Rod.
That means you beat.
Rod.
Well, listen,
man.
You beat Carolina and Tampa Bay.
That one back
It just
in,
means you need one out of Philly, Dallas, and Kansas City.
I'm just telling you how unrealistic
or
I
not
think.
Tampa Bay, Atlanta. Yeah.
I'm just saying how unrealistic I think 3-2 is. I just can't see it happening. I mean,
Play roughly 500 football against a pretty good schedule, and Rod's like, Super Bowl, baby, let's go.
that's what the fan base is going to be thinking if they go 3-2. I guarantee you.
Yeah.
So Anyway, what was your question? I'm sorry.
I'm just saying that's the flip side to this is
Yeah.
if you could get through that and survive it, even 2-3, and then maybe you beat Tampa Bay and Denver at home and you're 4-3, things are all of a sudden. I mean, number one, that means a lot of these questions are being answered in the affirmative because
That means
you're not
Penning's
going
probably
you're
going
not going to
well.
get to 4-3 without them.
Yeah.
But you could really look forward to a second half of the season where a playoff chase would then be very realistic.
Yeah, I mean, we know how this division is. I don't think you got 10 wins probably wins it anyway. So, I mean, if you can come out 3-2 and you got to find 7 more wins on the back end of the schedule, I like the chances.
And I think the key for Dennis Allen, too, is if they struggle next year, especially early on, you can't have the same type of mistakes keep happening. I think that's why fans were so frustrated last year between his 2 years is because the same types of mistakes just kept happening over and over and over, and that's a coaching thing. And so, I don't think people expect him to go 17-0 or 5-1 in the first 6 weeks, but you've just got to be better in those areas that they continually have struggled with: third down, red zone, falling behind early in games, and if they get off to another slow start, I mean, that has been Dennis Allen's MO as a Saints coach so far. Even though they started 2-0 last year, and yet we're 500 by, and they hit that lull. So I don't know. You just got to kind of correct those problems, and he's got to show that he can have the answers to that.
I think Derek Carr has to.
Yeah,
he has to play well. If he doesn't, I mean, these people are gonna lose it, man.
Yeah, well, but I do think that I think he's going to be a lot better this year.
I do.
I really do. I think this new offensive scheme is going to be a really good match for his skill set, and I don't think he's going to be an All-Pro. I don't think he's going to win the MVP, but I do think he's going to be in he's going to perform like a top 12 quarterback, which is what you want. It's what you're paying him for.
Right.
It's a lot better than what they've had the last couple of years.
Right.
Lots of reasons for optimism and pessimism on this team, and sometimes one thing can look like both. So fascinating season ahead. Before we get out of here, I did want to real quick, now that it's post June 1, and Jameis Winston and Michael Thomas were both post June 1 cuts for the Saints, cleared a little bit of cap space, not a ton, but they're up to like $6 million in cap space. Do we expect any moves now? I mean, obviously in camp they'll probably sign some bodies and see what happens. Is there any chance the Saints have a move in them here in the next week?
In the next week, I don't know. I think it might be a little bit closer to training camp, but I would expect that they bring somebody else in. It's kind of been their operating procedure here, but they've also deviated from that a little bit this year. I think we've kind of grown accustomed to seeing them hit the mid-tier free agent market pretty hard, and they didn't do it this year. They signed Chase Young, and that's about it. I mean, I don't even count Willie Gay as the mid-tier because he was like a 1-year, $5 million deal. Everybody else has been like bottom of the barrel free agent signing. 1 year. Cedric Wilson was 2 years. It's still like league minimum type of deals. I think there's still a lot of talented players out there. I'm really surprised that Hunter Renfrow is not in the Saints jersey already. I think there's still a couple potential starting caliber options as offensive linemen out there. There's a bunch of Pro Bowl caliber safeties out there, and right now they've got Jonathan Abram lined up as their starting safety. And I wouldn't see that. I think there's a lot of potential for upgrades there, but it's also just a matter some of these players, are the Saints even going to be a destination for them? It depends on what other teams are out there looking. The Saints are going to have to convince somebody to sign for probably a lot less than they were hoping to sign for, so they don't have a ton of space. Certainly, they aren't going to want to touch Alvin Kamara's contract or Ryan Ramczyk's contract, to get more money to sign somebody for a 1-year deal. So it's a very long-winded way of saying, yes, I think they're going to make a move. I just don't know if it's going to be Justin Simmons.
Yeah, and we saw after the draft, I mean, they went on a shopping spree, but it was at Goodwill. It was very, very bottom of the barrel.
Yeah,
discounted guys that, hey, if Lucas Patrick can be something, that's great, but it's not gonna cost you an arm and a leg. It was I think it was smart to add at least competition at those spots, but I don't really see the roster changing. There's going to be no one out there that you're going to add that guy and be like, whoa, this changed the total outcome of how I feel about the defense or the offensive line. Like they're just going to be small depth pieces. And I think even a guy like Hunter Renfrow, the only guy that I think would make a marginal difference is if they could somehow land Justin Simmons, but Justin Simmons isn't coming here because why would he accept like a minimum contract? That makes no sense.
If someone could Photoshop Mickey Loomis shopping at the Five Below, by the way, we would show it on the next episode. Just saying.
I'm sure somebody has that ability.
I'm sure they do too. It's just, will you take the time for us?
Just a matter of Zach throwing it out there on the podcast.
That's right. That's right. Well, that's Saints Insider for today's Tuesday, June the 4th. Rod Walker, Luke Johnson, and Matthew Paris. I'm Zach Ewing. Norman Bell's behind the glass. Subscribe to the channel, like the channel, like the show. Tell your friends about the channel, and we will see you next time. Probably be next week by the time we join you again, but we'll wrap up OTAs and look forward to mandatory minicamp. Until then, thanks for watching.